So this time we're going to be going a little more in depth, and we're going to be talking about creating deep fakes, just going through some basic software on how to create deep fakes. It's getting fairly pertinent now. A lot of this technology has advanced quite a bit. There's a couple interesting deep fakes out there. There's one of Tom Cruise, somebody's made up that looks really realistic, and he's even sort of impersonating his voice and stuff like that. So it's almost incredibly difficult to tell that it's not Tom Cruise. And there's some other applications and stuff like that we'll talk about here as we go through. Um, so, what are deep fakes? Essentially, deep faking comes in a couple forms. There's either what we call face swapping, so you would typically superimpose the face of, say, your face over a target that you want to do. And the interpretation of this face and how this face changes is what your neural network or other software would learn how to do to transpose how that face should look in that sort of, I guess you could call a pose orientation. The other way of deep fakes are called pose swapping. And you can think of a pose as sort of any orientation of your face or your, your facial expressions, your eye movements, and stuff like that. It's essentially taking um, your facial pose and superimposing it on this case we have here, the Mona Lisa, or there's a lot of other examples recently coming up. I think there's actually a service now being done for older photos where you can make come to life by superimposing a pose on that photo of an old person or a loved one, or some old photos to make them sort of essentially come to life, and then you'd have them in a frame, and you could see that person doing something. Unless you had sort of that person's, the way they spoke or talked or posed, it may not be entirely realistic, but it's giving you some interesting results. Like, you know, is this actually the way Mona Lisa moved, for instance, or whatever? Is that accurate? Probably not. Um, so, I mean, there could be a lot of different things that how this is interpreted, but it's kind of interesting to see what can happen. Okay, so really what I want to talk about going through and doing face swap, and the face swap software we'll use or look at here in short has this manifesto about using the tool. And I thought it was important to share this and to talk about um, when you do deep fakes or when you do face swapping, really pay attention to, not doing inappropriate content, not trying to do face swapping without others' consent or unethical or questionable purposes. And really, I mean, if you're making these things and you have sort of the understanding, it can really put a damper on your career or the outlook, unless you're sort of making YouTube videos about this stuff all the time, I guess. But I think in the future there might be legalities about how this technology is used and where it's used. Okay, so let's just talk about what I'll talk about in this sort of presentation is how to do face swapping and creating deep fakes with face swapping. So this is where we're taking a target face. So in this case, we're going to swap this actress's face with the face of Nicolas Cage as an example. So we'd select these two targets. We'd sort of download or grab a bunch of images of this actress, and then of this actor, Nicolas Cage, or whoever we're going to be doing face swapping with. And then we use the software to extract the faces. So we don't actually want to train our model to understand the whole orientation. All we really want to understand is just the facial part. And what the deepfake software will do is extract the face, orientate it, so put it in the right orientation, and zoom in on just that face. So that's a piece that'll be trained. So once after you do the extract faces, then you work towards cleaning up the data. So you might throw out some frames that aren't looking quite well or whatever, or you might sort out faces or remove some of those other faces. So if you're downloading examples of faces from Google or Bing, for instance, if you're downloading celebrity faces, you're going to end up probably with some garbage faces you want to clean and do stuff like that. And then there's the training the model. And then once the model's trained, you can do essentially convert and create your deep fake. Okay. Here's an example of what I generated just quickly of, so this is a clip from Pretty Women. And what I'm doing is just swapping out Julia Roberts for Scarlett Johansson in this example. And we'll just go through that. So in order for me to sort of work through that example, what I did is I just went on I wrote a quick script to go on to Bing, or it could be Google, and do a search for Julia Roberts and extract, and it pulled down all these pictures of Julia Roberts. And then I used the Faceswap software to extract all the faces and then do a sort features. And this sorting allows me to sort of determine how many duplicates I may want or filter out, and to remove other faces. So you can see there's a couple other faces in here that aren't Julia Roberts that we need to clean out. And the sort feature essentially does a similarity matching of the faces. So you get all the faces that are similar to each other, and then you can just go through and remove them. Okay, so like I said, and I'll show the software quickly is here at the end, but this is all quite easily done with I think it's Windows, Linux. I'm not sure if there's a Mac version, but you can just easily pull this down from this website here. There's a release. You pull it down, install it on your computer, and you can be up to and running here pretty quickly. So in this example, screenshot, we're just showing how to extract, and this one here, it's just extracting videos from, extracting faces from video, I guess I should say, and then outputting them to a folder. Okay, so what I said before is what we generally have to do is after we extract all the faces, we want to clean up the faces. So we want to remove any faces that aren't our target or source. And then we want to remove any faces that may have different makeup or glasses or facial hair or something like that. It may not be consistent with the targets you want to swap out. And then once you have all your faces sort of designed, what essentially you do is you take the one set of faces you want to translate from to the faces you want to translate to. You set these up as sort of your inputs A and inputs B, and you use this thing called an alignments file. And the alignments file, it just essentially describes where the face is in the image. And you just use the software to train these faces, and it'll do the translation. So you can see that it's slowly learning how to do the translation here. You can see this is the input A, input B, and then the translation from A to B. And you can see that over time, typically it'll vary between the type of model you're using and how many iterations you're using it for or whatever. On the villain model, which is the popular model been used for a lot of good examples, it typically takes up to a week. I think on my machine it was just a couple of days. I have a fairly good GPU on my machine, but it could take up to a week, or potentially more if you don't have access to a good GPU or you're using a CPU. Okay, and then you convert the target video. So here's an example of that video I was talking about, the one I produced. So this is Scarlett Johansson being swapped out for Julia Roberts. And in the Faceswap software, it does a reasonably good job, but you can see here, if I scroll through, there's a couple little spots here you can see where it's not actually blending the face in correctly. And there's other software pieces or other software projects that allow you to do deepfakes that pay attention to these types of details that can make it look a lot better. But for this software, for just my basic use, I was able to just quickly do that. If you wanted to sort of adhere more to those details, that's something you could easily take care of. Okay. And then questions and thoughts, guys, or do you want me to go over anything? You want me to, I can bring up the software too here. Just have to stop the share.
Michael, so there are some of these apps that you only provide one picture of yourself or anyone. For example, that MyHeritage that you mentioned, they take your ancestors, for example, picture, and they do the deepfake and make animated videos of them. But I was wondering if one picture is enough. I'm assuming that we can only do a limited moves and very simple animations with only one picture, whereas in your video you're uploading many pictures of Scarlett Johansson to replace Julia Roberts. So
Yeah, so let me just go back to the I'll just go back to the slideshow, and I'll go back to the one of the first slides here. So yeah, so what you're basically talking about is pose swapping. And so this is the original picture of the Mona Lisa. And what we've done is, so we're just using one image. And what we're essentially doing is taking the pose from a person's face and translating the image to match that pose. And you can see in these examples here that they actually do a fair bit of a range of movement, like a little more than you might expect than just a straight face-on view. It's actually accounting for rotations and stuff like that. And the way it does that is it sort of takes this 2D image of the face and maps it onto a 3D object, and then and from the images or from the video of you, it essentially takes a 3D perception of what your face would look like, orientates your face in that direction, then maps that sort of this image across that. So there's actually quite a bit different range of orientations and I guess poses you could do. But yeah, I mean, there actually is a project called Avatar Iffy that is out right now for Zoom, where you could take a picture of any star or actress and use that as your avatar. And then as I'm talking or whatever, and it may not work for me with my beard, but for you guys, it may work quite well. You could have Einstein as your picture, and then it would be essentially doing all the face or whatever. So it's, yeah, I mean, the pose estimation stuff is not as advanced as this basic face swapping stuff, but it is coming along, and they're making a lot more progress. But and it's still considered essentially a deep fakes, if you will. Yeah, great question though.
thank you.
Michael, I also have a question. Do you think these open source tools promote the creation of deepfakes, and also how they control the use of this technology?
Yeah, so right now there is no control over this use of technology aside from social pressures or whatever. I mean, I have not heard of any laws or anything that's preventing people from using it. Um, and aside from these open source projects, you just go on to the GitHub repo or whatever it is, download the software, and some of them aren't as nice as this nice UI interface, but a lot of them have a pretty comprehensive set of tools that you can use to generate these things quite easily. And there's a number of these projects out there actually. It's gotten somewhere probably in the dozens now. It's not, maybe not up to 100, but there is quite a substantial amount of them. And this one I chose, this Faceswap one, it's nice because in my book I talk a lot about interpreting faces and doing swapping or changing the faces or generating faces in my Generating New Reality book. So this was appropriate to me. And the other thing I liked about the Faceswap project, it actually has on their site about their manifesto and what sort of things you should be watching for with using it. So, I mean, that's something I want to promote. I don't want to promote a whole bunch of people that are just generating this content and it becomes illegal, right? Because if it becomes a serious problem, the government's going to make it illegal, or other institutions are going to sort of start frowning on it. So I think it's useful. It has some good applications. It's just that it's somewhat maybe being abused a little bit too much right now. Any other questions, guys, before maybe I...
Mhm.
Let me share the software. So this is the software. It's essentially just a Windows application. And really the tabs here at the top really define the workflow for the, so the first thing is you just sort of select your extract, and you're either going to pick a video or a folder of images where you want to extract. And when you run this, this essentially extracts all the faces from those images that you can use for training. And then when you get into the training, you essentially pick those folders of the faces, and then you would just pick your folders of faces. There's this alignment file, and the alignment file is generated with the extract piece. And what it's, the extract piece is doing is just extracting where the eyes are, the mouth are, and the nose, and giving you sort of an orientation about the face and the scale of the face and all that good stuff. So that when you do these sort of training from A to B across the software, it knows how to sort of overlay those two images. So you're not getting a bunch of inconsistencies or other pieces of data. Essentially, it makes the training a lot better. But otherwise, the training is just essentially an autoencoder, well, actually a double autoencoder. So it's essentially just training from how to transform the one face into the other face. And that's, you're just training a deep learning neural network to essentially transform this one face to the other face. Once you have that model trained, you can actually just apply it to any faces, right? So you can just take that person's face, pass it through the autoencoder, and it'll spit out what the person's face will be. And that's the same thing kind of with the pose estimation as well, if you're using deep learning as well. Okay. So, and that's all pretty much there is to it. There's the convert, where you take your input or output directories, your alignments files, and then your reference video, and you click convert. I don't have any of this really set up, but you can see there's not a lot of options or anything to set on here. It's pretty simple, really. And the tools piece, the only thing you typically use the tools for is either to sort or clean up your alignments file. If you're removing faces that you want from the alignments file, you just have to go through this. But otherwise, I mean, it's really quite simple to walk through. So let me just go back to the presentation. So what I wanted to ask you guys for, as far as questions go, how would you guys feel if somebody sort of did a deep fake on you without your consent, not necessarily a compromising position, but just in some way they'd use your face? How would you feel?
Well, to be honest, I will feel very scared, and depending on the content, maybe very sad, because it can have a lot of negative consequences. And once the video is spread out, it's very difficult to control it and to control the impact of it. So I will be very scared, actually.
Okay. Isa?
Yeah, obviously, it doesn't feel good if it's something that misrepresents me or harms my reputation. But otherwise, if it's just a funny video, something that, doesn't harm your reputation, I don't have a problem.
Okay. There is so much potential for harm, for reputations and stuff like that. Do you think this technology should be legally controlled by the government?
I think, yeah, the government should put in place maybe some regulations, but also the social media platforms should be able to control the videos that they distribute across their platforms, because ultimately a video becomes popular is because of the platform that is distributing that video.
Right. So you're suggesting maybe it should just be the platform that's imposing these?
Yeah, that maybe put in place some kind of technology to recognize those deepfakes and remove them right away.
Okay. Isa?
Yeah, I agree that there must be some policies, but I don't think it should be illegal because, first of all, it's really hard to track down all the individuals because it's available to everyone and everyone can fabricate fake videos nowadays. And not all of them have a bad or malicious intent behind them. So most of them are just funny and for entertainment only. However, I think there must be a watermark or a label on the video that shows that this video is generated by deepfake. Or even if the producer doesn't follow this rule, the video apps or social media where the video is being circulated should have a built-in AI detector, as Luisa said. So it's basically AI versus AI, where AI detectors are detecting the videos made by AI. But still, depending on the applications, sometimes some applications could be illegal. For example, if someone is using another actor's face, for example, in production of a new movie or advertisement,
Yeah.
there should be a consent from that actor.
Well, so this is brings up a really good point, right? So before you could copyright music, you could copyright books, you could copyright technologies. Should we have copyrights for faces?
Yeah.
Right, right. I
Sure.
mean,
Yeah.
so that would sort of prevent anybody from just taking a picture. That would be restrictive on paparazzi or other people, but that might be the law that needs to be put in place for this stuff, right? It's an interesting concept. Continuing with that concept, what if you had a favorite old movie or just some old movie that had the actors swapped out for some either modern actors or stuff like that? Would you find it appealing to watch such a movie, Isa or Louisa?
Maybe if the new video contains an actor that I like it, and then they swap it for that actor, maybe I will be appealing to watch it. But even though you know that it's not real, so I don't know. No, I don't. Yeah, no, I don't think
Well,
so.
it's kind of like a remake, though, right? Isa, in a comment.
Yeah, it could be interesting. It's more subjective, I think, depending on the um, real actors or actresses in the movie and the ones that are replacing them. If uh, I like those actors better, it depends on that. But it will be very interesting to see such a movie.
Right, right. Okay. Let me just go back a bit. So, with respect to um, good applications or positive applications, do either of you think there could be sort of positive benefits from this deepfakes technology?
From an article that I was reading, I saw that, if, for example, in the healthcare sector, they are using this kind of technology to create fake brain MRI scans. And then the researchers found that by training algorithms on this fake medical image, they can also get good results in their models. And they only need to use only like 10% of real image, and then the others can be deep fakes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I guess in terms of research, maybe this could have some positive benefits.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Isa?
Yeah, I saw a thing in clothing brands, for example, can um, show fashion outfits on a variety of models with different sizes, but only using only one model and replacing it with different models with different sizes, and even the customers themselves, they can quickly try on clothes online and see how an outfit would look like on them before purchasing the outfit. Another interesting application I read somewhere was that it can help patients with Alzheimer's disease to interact with a younger face that they may remember. So it was very interesting for me.
That's an interesting application. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other questions, guys, or discussions?
I was gonna say most of about the legalizations, about deepfake. Most of all, I think education and training about this matter is very important, because oftentimes people are inclined to believe in anything that confirms their existing beliefs or views, and it's not limited to deepfake videos. And spreading false information is easy, especially in social media, and deepfake makes it easier. So everyone should be aware of existence of this technology and not trust every source.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the problem, because you get people saying, well, everything's fake or fake news, right? And that's, you know, that's been abused. Louisa, any parting comments?
I guess, Michael, how many pictures do you need on average to create like a good deepfake?
Yeah, so for that one I did there was probably about 500 images of Scarlett Johansson, 500 images of Julia Roberts, and that created a reasonably good approximation. It depends on the software or how much you train and stuff like that, but it's not a huge amount of images. It's really 500 to 1,000 is typically good enough for a lot of applications. The pose swapping example here, I mean, you really have just one image that you're doing, and the software is sophisticated enough to take, say, a pose of your face and interpret that, and then uh, push that over. So I mean, like I mentioned, that avatar Iffy can actually do it in real time. If you have a good enough GPU, it could actually do it in real time, and you could use this on Zoom, or it's even has I think an overlay for various face communication apps or on your phone or stuff like that. It's even sort of trying to push that. But I don't know how effective it is on a phone, because the phone probably may not have the CPU or GPU to be able to do the inference quick enough to do the essentially the translation in real time. Like it might could take a second or something like that, so it'd be quite slow. But I mean, the technology's coming up, so who knows? Yeah. Okay, guys, great. Um, Great chat. I think it's getting pretty relevant now, so it's interesting, and I guess we'll see how this goes from here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me just stop that.